This character I want to cosplay has crisp details and weird shapes, and I have no clue how to make them. That sound like you? Yeah, I've been there. Despite the name maybe making you a little bit nervous, appliqué is actually so easy. Today, I'm going to go over my 3 favorite methods for making appliqué that I use on my own costumes and in my sewing patterns. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Cosplayton, a cosplay pattern maker with a focus on keeping cosplay fun and inclusive for all. So when I say appliqué, I kind of don't mean it. I'm using it as like a fast and loose umbrella term. I technically would only consider the first method appliqué, but who's gonna come after me? The appliqué police? For each of these methods, I am going to go into pros and cons about why I like and I don't like each method and why they're good for certain applications but maybe not for others. Ultimately, it's up to you to pick what works best for your project. These are just 3 methods that I like to use. First method we're going over is heat and bond. Heat and bond does not usually come like this. I own a giant 60 or 80 yard bolt of it because I use it for my job, but it also comes in little bags like this one shown here. Now, heat and bond has 2 sides, a smooth papery side and a rough glue side. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to cut out a square approximately an inch larger than your finished appliqué is going to be around all edges. Heat and bond comes in different types such as heavyweight, lightweight, stretch, and depending on the heat and bond you're using, it's going to have different ironing instructions. So make sure you check the instructions before you turn on your iron. Then you're going to want to place that rough glue side on the wrong side of your fabric. Once it's on the wrong side of your fabric, use an iron or a heat press and follow those instructions and press it down. Once it's pressed down, you can use a pencil or a marker and start tracing out your appliqué. Now you're going to want to make sure that you trace your appliqué mirrored, as this is the wrong side of the fabric and we are going to be flipping it around when we attach it to our finished costume. Once you've got your appliqué traced out, take a pair of scissors and very carefully cut around the edges. Once your appliqué is cut out, take that paper backing off the back and peel it off. If you've ironed it down enough, it should just come right off and leave a smooth glue surface on the wrong side of your fabric. If the glue starts coming up while you're peeling, just take it back to your iron and give it a press for a couple more seconds. Now that your appliqué is all prepared, we're ready to attach it to your costume. Flip it over and place that shiny glue side down on the right side of your fabric. Following the instructions on your heat and bond, iron it onto your costume. Make sure you take your time with this part, as you really do want that glue to melt on both your appliqué piece and your regular fabric. Once you're all ironed down, you could call it here. This could be the end of your appliqué. You've got a clean appliqué on a piece of fabric and it is stuck there. However, depending on the fabric you're using, it might fray, and the longer it frays, the worse your appliqué is going to look. So I always recommend adding some sort of stitching to the edge of your appliqué to secure those raw edges in place and make sure they don't fray. I personally like using a zigzag stitch with a really short stitch length, which we call a satin stitch, and zigzagging around all the edges. You may find it beneficial to add a piece of stabilizer or interfacing on the other side of your fabric to make sure that your fabric doesn't buckle under the weight of that satin stitch, because it is a lot of heavy stitches in a very small surface area. If you don't like the look of a satin stitch or you just want to try something else, there's also a variety of decorative stitches you can do. I tried a couple on this sample piece using some decorative stitches from my machine, but feel free to play around and find what works for you. Now here are the pros of using heat and bond. Number 1, it is easy to find. You can find it at Walmart, craft stores, fabric stores, online. It also doesn't require any special tools that you wouldn't already have. It requires fabric, scissors, an iron, and a sewing machine, and that's it. If you're already sewing a cosplay, you should have these. It is also the only method I'm going over on this list that uses actual fabric. I personally love playing with different textures and colors on my costume, and I love unique fabric selections, so that's why I really love heat and bond, because it really lets me play around with those fabrics. And the final pro is they're affordable. Heat and bond, when it comes in those little bags, are really not that expensive, and a little goes a long way. And for the cons, the fabric can fray. As mentioned earlier, you do have to take that time, if your fabric frays, to add some detail stitching over the edges, which leads into another con, that can take a lot of time. As well, if you're not stitching it down and you don't have to worry about fraying, that glue can still come up in time. I've had times where my appliqué has peeled up, even though heat and bond says it is ultra hold. It just depends on your fabric and depends on how hard you ironed it down. And as well, it also adds extra bulk to the fabric. You are adding an extra layer of fabric as well as an extra layer of glue, and if you need a certain amount of flow and drape and movement on your fabric, this may not be the method for you. Method number 2 is heat transfer vinyl. Heat transfer vinyl is a fantastic resource if you already have a cutting machine, like my Cricut behind me. If you don't have a cutting machine, it is a little bit trickier to use, but not impossible. So how do you use it? Heat transfer vinyl has 2 sides, a plastic side that actually is a plastic sheet, and then the side that actually has your vinyl and your glue. What you're going to want to do if you're using a cutting machine is place your heat transfer vinyl with that shiny plastic side down and that glue side facing up. You're then going to want to select the heat transfer or iron-on vinyl setting on your cutting machine and cut it out mirrored. Mirrored is very important because we are cutting on the wrong side of the heat transfer vinyl right now, and if you don't mirror it, you're going to have a backwards applique. Once it's cut out, you can use your hands, a pin, or a weeding tool to peel away all of the heat transfer vinyl that you don't need, leaving only your shape on that plastic sheet. That plastic sheet helps keep everything together and make sure that your heat transfer vinyl doesn't curl or do anything weird while you're trying to iron it down. Then what you want to do is you want to flip it over so that plastic sheet is facing up, place that on your fabric, place a press cloth or a Teflon sheet in between your fabric and your iron, and then following the instructions on your heat transfer vinyl, iron it down. If you have a heat press, they are so helpful for this, but if not, a regular iron will work just fine. You do just have to work a little hard and make sure that you're really pressing down on that vinyl. Once you're done, wait for your vinyl to cool and then start peeling off that plastic sheet. If when peeling off that plastic sheet some of the vinyl goes with it, just put that plastic sheet back down, iron it a little bit more, wait for it to cool, and try again. Heat transfer vinyl I find is so easy and creates a really clean finish. I've used it on a couple costumes of mine, including Molly Mock, where I used glitter heat transfer vinyl as well as holographic heat transfer vinyl, and I think the finish it made alongside my embroidery is gorgeous. The pros! Heat transfer vinyl is easy to find at most craft stores. If you've got a Michaels near you, they usually have an entire section dedicated to Cricut, Silhouette, Sizer, and all sorts of different brands of heat transfer vinyl. It also comes in a variety of colors and finishes. I've got holographic, I've got glitter, I've got matte, I've got shiny, I've got everything. Heat transfer vinyl is also so easy to use if you have a cutting machine. If you have sensitive baby wrists like me that get hurt from a lot of hand cutting, a heat transfer vinyl may be the method for you. Also, if you have a Cricut, a lot of them can cut out fabrics, including bonded fabrics, which means fabric with heat and bond ironed onto it. However, the cons, if you don't have a cutting machine, they are very expensive to get. You're running $200, $300, $400, $500 for a cutting machine. So if you don't have one, you sure can use heat transfer vinyl. It is just going to be more difficult. If you are interested in getting something like a Cricut, I definitely would recommend looking on Facebook Marketplace or any sort of like used marketplace in your community to see if somebody's selling them, because somebody always is. It is also expensive to purchase heat transfer vinyl in large quantities if needed. For example, with my squib jacket, that ended up being about $40 to $50 worth of heat transfer vinyl to make that front little detail piece. And also, it can be hard to get it to stick with a regular iron. It's not impossible, but heat transfer vinyl is really meant for heat presses, which are another money sink that if you are trying to do this on a budget, might be a little bit too much for you. As said, not impossible, just a little difficult, so take your time, be careful, and don't be afraid to Google or YouTube if you get stuck. Method 3 is my quick and dirty queen, fabric paint. Now, fabric paint often gets like looked down in the community because it seems like a messy method. But let me tell you, fabric paint in a pinch, absolute godsend. When I first made my Squip cosplay in 2019, all of those circuitry patterns you see were entirely hand painted. As well, I've also used hand painting most recently on my Rhea Ripley vest. I used a combination of leather paints as well as Posca paint pens to achieve this finish. For fabric paint, there are so many different types of paint you can use. You can use specialized fabric paint, you can use leather paint, you can use Posca paint pens. And if you're in a pinch, acrylic paint and fabric medium are meant to work together. You mix a little bit of acrylic paint and a little bit of fabric medium together and it turns any paint into fabric paint. It is perfect if you're on a budget and you don't want to spend all that money on a bottle of fabric paint that you're only going to use a little bit of. To explain fabric paint, it's pretty easy. You take a stencil, you trace it onto your fabric, you paint it. That really is one of the first pros of fabric paint, is that it is so easy to use as well as being so accessible and so affordable. As well, another pro is that you can easily blend together colors and create these almost complex painting-like effects on your applique that you aren't able to get with something like heat transfer vinyl or heat and bond. However, going into the cons, it takes forever. As said, with my Squip coat, I didn't want to spend $300 on custom printed fabric, but ended up easily spending 60 to 80 hours hand painting that entire coat. I would never do it again. Or for example, with my Rhea Ripley vest, it took 3, 4, 5 coats of paint to get that white as crisp as it is. It does take a while. You do have to worry about things like drying times. As well, if you're using a fabric with like a thicker weave that I almost want to call like grainier in a way, you're gonna have problems getting those really crisp, clean lines because that grain line of the fabric is going to want to work against you. Smoother fabrics create smoother painting, rougher fabrics create rougher painting. And there you go. Those are 3 methods to make easy applique. I get a lot of questions about how I personally make applique, and while these aren't the only 3 methods, these are the ones that I personally use the most often, and I hope you found some help in them. If you did, I really would appreciate it if you left a like, a comment, a subscribe, or even shared with a friend. I'm currently not in the YouTube partner program, so I make $0 from YouTube. I do this all for the love of the game and for helping people like you. So if you find it helpful, letting me know makes my day. You can find me on all social medias at Cospayton, Cospayton, or shop my patterns, resources, and tutorials at cospayton.com. Thank you so much for watching, and happy making!